The communists initiated the Cold War for the same reason they would have started a hot war had that been feasible, or would now, should they ever decide that the free world was weak enough for them to risk it. Whatever the degree of tension they create, it is a substitute for hot war, another means of achieving their end. And their end, of course, is world conquest.
World conquest by actions short of war. Actions that are political, economic, and ideological. These three methods. First, we will consider the political method and the techniques the communists use when they attempt to acquire their objectives in this way. We would do well to consider the success the communists have had by using the political method alone. As you will see from the black area on this map, they have expanded between 1940 and 1954, took over 15 countries, totaling 714 million people. Since 1954, there have been major internal disruptions in 9 additional countries outside the Iron Curtain. Now, how do they go about applying this political method? The communist coup in Czechoslovakia in 1948 provides us with a blueprint of the ideal formula for political conquest, which includes taking over a country without outside intervention. Destruction of its parliamentary form of government. Murder of its democratic leaders when necessary. Rigged elections with only the communist candidates on the ballot. Once the penetration is complete, all this is backed by the naked force of military occupation. By such devices, the Soviet Union turned its neighboring state into satellites, political and economic puppets. In China, political action was cruder, but no less effective. Here, it was political action by conquest.
This is not about freedom or personal choice. It's about protecting yourself and those around you.
And so overwhelming has this political conquest been that the communists have been able to propel Red China to a position of major influence in the Eastern world. The political force method includes the suppression of freedom in a country already under communist control without outside interference. Inside the Iron Curtain, there were revolutions without help from the outside.
With us, you refused to work with us. You forced us our backs into the situation we're in right now. It's time for people to stand up.
In East Germany in 1953, Poland in 1956, Hungary in the same year, and Tibet in 1959, all of them brutally suppressed. And finally, there is the International Communist Party, dedicated to the subversion and overthrow of every still free government. Where the political method may not prevail, there is always the economic method.
I'm Frank McGee. Let's consider for a moment this matter of the communist use of economic methods to achieve conquest and how it's done. The present masters of the Soviet Union have said to us, peaceful coexistence until we bury you. They propose to officiate at our interment by catching up with us industrially and then surpassing us. They're working hard at it. Today, the 200 million inhabitants of the Soviet state bend their backs and their talents to the Kremlin's will. And Sputnik and Sputnik's successors have proved conclusively enough the USSR's proficiency in the area of technical ability. Throughout the vast stretches of this empire, you find new industrial cities, plants, assembly lines, the most modern equipment. Soviet products of every description awaiting delivery and reaching industrially backward areas of the non-communist world. Teams of Russian technicians are available to operate this machine. This is economic penetration, paving the way for political takeover. The hand of Soviet friendship, which usually precedes an attempt at economic penetration, has been reaching into every part of the world which shows the slightest inclination to receive it. Recently, we've seen it extend into our own hemisphere, into turbulent Cuba, where it was embraced as a triumph of Soviet policy. A few statistics will demonstrate how serious this threat is becoming to the free world. Of the entire annual Soviet economic capability, their gross national product, 70%, or it may run as high as 80%, is devoted to the area of heavy industry. The U.S. and free world share of gross national product devoted to the same area is certainly not much more than 20%. In terms of volume applied to this area of gross national product, the Soviet Union is beginning to surge ahead.
Finally, the communists attempt ideological penetration. Perhaps their strongest efforts go into this kind of penetration into the free world. Before we talk about ideological penetration itself, let's take a look at the reasons why this form of penetration is so important to the communists. For one thing, communist aggression has alarmed many free nations and produced their united will to resist. These nations have implemented their will to resist all other forms of Soviet penetration through a number of trade agreements. The United States and other industrially strong nations of the free world are actively promoting better living conditions all over the world. This has the effect not only of helping these countries to improve their industrial and economic position, but also of providing a defense against communist intrigue, which flourishes in depressed economic areas. This document recognizes respect for human dignity as the inalienable basis of civilization. Among the fundamental rights of man specifically named are respect for the sanctity of human life, the right to freedom of speech, of conscience and religion, of opinion and belief, the right of every man to work and to receive his just reward, the right of the family to stability, and the right of parents over their children and their education. In all these ways, economically, militarily, morally, the world outside the communist orbit slowly draws itself together. The practical communists appraise this consolidation of free world defenses. It confronts them with a serious deterrence to their world ambitions. Hence, they must destroy Allied unity, or at least weaken it. How? Well, here we return to the subject of ideological penetration. For if all other forms of penetration don't work, if the united strength of the non-communist world makes political penetration unfeasible and economic penetration unsuccessful, if cultural penetration does not do the job, the communists can always hope to succeed by resorting to ideological warfare against their strongest opponent, meaning us. Americans, go home. Wall Street warmongers, down with American imperialism. Peace, yes, peace, their propaganda screams. On communist terms, naturally. Inside the free world, communists and their sympathizers seek to foment suspicion and distrust of our motives, even attempt to influence our allies to eliminate our overseas bases, which are protecting them as well as us. Their mediums of mass communication are tireless in vilifying us as a nation and as individuals, such as depicting you as a brute and a ravager. Is there a chance that the communists will succeed? Is there a possibility that our allies will accept this malicious perversion of us and everything we stand for? In large part, that is going to depend on how thoroughly we understand this conflict and how dedicated we are to victory. Understanding is a continuing process, and it embraces many different aspects of our day-to-day living. It is, at root, a function which involves the flow of information.
I am Lowell Thomas. We live amid the greatest abundance of information any people has ever had. But survey after survey reveals an astonishingly low informational level among us. To be sure, the right to remain uninformed is one of the privileges of a democracy, But in a contest such as the one we are engaged in, it is one of the surest ways of losing our freedom. Being informed does not mean only keeping up to date on current events, important though that is. It means also being aware of developments within our own nation and the forces that move through it, its weaknesses as well as its strengths. We all too often dishonor our freedom and demean it. But that's not the full story. If it were, our system would have collapsed long before this. The full story is in the progress we consistently make through law and through education, the way free men must. The communists would like to have you, as well as people in every country in the world, believe otherwise. And once they have succeeded in letting the idea take root that our deficiencies are our chief characteristics, once they have managed to erode our faith in ourselves at least a little, that much of the battle is lost.
A snake of a whisper is abroad that Americans have lost touch with their past. Is it true? It can't be, if we are to survive and win. If we understand the conflict, then we understand the need to keep America strong in her greatest challenge by keeping alive the standards and the traditions which have been her glory. What are the bulwarks of our past upon which our society has been built? There are many, and we have discussed some of them. Our spiritual heritage, our belief in individual liberty. But there is yet another, as important as any of these.
I am Helen Hayes. Many of us who are living now will never see the end of the conflict which dominates our lives. Leaders change, and leadership passes from one generation to the next. But for generations, or certainly for many years, the challenge which confronts us will continue. So it becomes not just a hope, but an urgent condition for a peaceful future that those who are catapulted into the problems of maturity with every passing year will understand the challenge and devote themselves to it even as you and I must. Interest cannot lag, efforts cannot cease. It will require the sternest kind of dedication, bred as it were into the American character. The training grounds in which this discipline will be planted and perfected are the institutions which have shaped our society, particularly the home, which has always been in our culture the nucleus of society itself. The home is the wellspring of the strongest qualities of citizenship, and it must remain so if we are to preserve the toughness of moral fiber, which is our strongest heritage.
A toughness of moral fiber, a belief in the right, as God gives us to see the right, as Lincoln put it in words which are carved into our national soul. These are the sinewy threads of our past. Keeping America strong, this is our challenge. Keeping the vision of liberty bright, keeping the threads of our past, the strands of moral toughness with which our history is bound. Moral toughness, the quality which made men work instead of weep on the hostile shores of New England, which bled mortally yet never died on 100 fields and oceans stretching out from Valley Forge, which moved strong men west, bringing with them first only their pride, then their railroads, which built cities and governments, and created wealth, and above all, made freedom the birthright of every man. That quality must still live within us, for without it, we are surely lost. And it will live, so long as we keep faith in our future and faith in our past. This is the challenge, as compelling, as severe, as crucial as Americans in any age have ever faced.